The snow came sideways that morning, howling down from the northern ridges like a voice crying over the grave of the world. It swept across the flatlands and coiled into the canyons, stinging the skin like needles and masking the trail so completely it was a wonder the wagon hadn't vanished entirely. But through it all, the child sat upright in the back, spine stiff despite the cold, hands gripping a rusted tin lunchbox like it held her life inside. Maybe it did. The driver, a haggard trader who'd been paid 2 silver to make the delivery, spat into the wind and motioned ahead. "Cabin's just yonder past some trees. Big fellow'll be waiting. Don't talk much. Don't need to." He glanced back at the girl, but she didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the black shape rising from the trees like a half-finished fortress. The cabin. She climbed down without a word. No coat, just a burlap shawl over thin shoulders. The trader hesitated a moment, then cracked the reins and disappeared into the blizzard without another look. The girl trudged toward the cabin. Wind blew so hard it seemed to lift her, and more than once she stumbled. But she reached the porch. A heavy boot step thudded from within. The door creaked open, and Phil the frame was the largest man she'd ever seen, broad like a barn door, with tangled black hair, streaks of silver at the temples, and a face carved by years of sun, war, and sorrow. He looked down at her. "You're here only to cook," he said, voice low as distant thunder. "Nothing else." He stepped aside. The warmth of the hearth barely touched her when she entered. The place smelled like ash and old leather. Dust clung to the furniture, and the hearth, though lit, crackled half-heartedly. She moved to the kitchen instinctively, setting her lunchbox down on a worn counter. She took out the only thing she had brought, 3 folded cloths, a dull knife, and a page torn from a cook's Bible. Her mother had once called it that, a handwritten recipe list. The man sat in a chair by the fire, watching. She washed the rusted pans and tried to scrape dried beans from the bottom of the pot. When she lit the stove, it took 3 tries. He never moved. When she set a small plate of boiled beans and flatbread on the table, he didn't touch it. Later, when she returned from washing up, the plate was empty. That night, he tossed a wool blanket onto the floor near the kitchen. "You sleep there," he said. She nodded once, curled on the boards, and didn't cry. She hadn't cried in days. In the weeks that followed, their pattern held. She cooked what little there was, root vegetables, dried meat, forage scraps from behind the shed. He hunted rarely, returning with the occasional rabbit or squirrel. He never spoke unless necessary. She never asked questions. One afternoon she ventured outside to fetch water from the well. Snow still crusted the trees, but sunlight caught the frozen branches like they were glass. She saw a small shed at the edge of the property, its roof sagging, the door half open. Curious, she crept near. Inside was a barn. The smell hit first, hay, dust, something older. She stepped in, slow and soft. Tools lined the walls. A wheelbarrow, broken. A child's wooden horse lay on its side near a corner, one leg splintered off. She picked it up. The wind changed. A shadow blocked the light behind her. "Put it down." The man's voice cut through the barn like a blade. She dropped it, backing away. He stepped in, face like granite. "You don't go in here," he said. "Not ever. Next time. I send you back." She nodded, trembling. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. That night, she laid out 2 plates at the table. He didn't eat inside. He never had, but she did it anyway. She didn't look up when he entered. She ate her half in silence, spoon slow, hand steady. Then his chair scraped the floor. He Saturday, ate. Nothing was said. Days passed. The thaw began. Creeks ran again. Trees sighed in the wind. She swept the floors and organized the jars by color, not label. She found an old shirt of his hanging by the stove and mended the torn sleeve without asking. He watched her more now. Not constantly, but enough. When she slipped while reaching high on a shelf, his hand shot out to catch the pot before it shattered. He didn't say a word, just set it down and walked away. She found a loose board in the hallway floor one day. Beneath it, a box of old letters, folded tight, ink faded. Some addressed to Clara, others to my boy. She didn't read them. She placed them back exactly as she found them. That evening, he spoke again. "You look like her, a little." She didn't ask who. He added, not in the face, in how you move, like you're trying not to be seen. She glanced at him for the first time. I'm not trying. He nodded. Still do. They fell quiet again. The wind howled harder that night. She awoke to it and found the fire low. She added kindling, fed the flame until it warmed the room. When she toned, he was watching from his chair. Not scowling, just watching. Storm's getting bad, he muttered. Might get snowed in. She didn't reply. Used to be, he added slowly. That was the best part. Me, my wife, my son. No wagons. No strangers. Just us. Snow made the world small. She sat on the floor beside the hearth. He didn't look at her again, but he didn't stop talking either. Fire took him. Cabin I built with my own damn hands. Burned to ash one night while I was out scouting for the army. Didn't even see the smoke till the next day. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Nothing left but that damn horse in the barn. Don't know why I keep it. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, not from cold. He didn't expect her to answer. The next morning, he wasn't in his chair. She panicked for a moment until she saw him outside, chopping wood. He worked like each swing might split his ghost in half. She brought him water. He didn't thank her, but he drank. That evening, she caught a rabbit in a trap he had forgotten to check. She skinned it clumsily but managed to prepare a stew. He didn't comment on the taste, but he took seconds. Later, she placed a tiny wooden horse, now cleaned, on the mantel. He looked at it, then at her. I told you to stay out of that barn. I didn't go in, she said. Just fixed it. He said nothing for a long time. Then, still told you. She stood her ground. I thought maybe it should be where someone could see it. He stared at the fire a while longer, then rose and went to bed without another word. The next morning, the horse was still there. One day, a rider came up the trail, Reverend Kershaw, from town. Tall, pale, tight-lipped. He looked the girl over, then turned to Gideon. Folks asking questions. Bandits down south. Houses burning. Gideon grunted. You hiding her from someone? No, Gideon said. Hired her to cook. The Reverend narrowed his eyes. That girl ain't white. Gideon stepped forward. She ain't yours either. Kershaw sniffed. People get nervous, seeing a big man like you alone with a brown-skinned girl in the woods. I ain't responsible for their nerves. She ain't safe here. She's safer here than she's ever been. The Reverend left. That night, she asked, Am I? He looked over. Are you what? Safe. He didn't answer right away. Then, I don't know. I tried to be. That's all I can do. She nodded. That's enough. The next few days passed quiet. But the wind carried new sounds now. Gunfire in the distance, horses where no travelers should be. Gideon started sleeping lighter, rifle close. She noticed. One night, while she stirred a pot of beans, he said, You're not just cooking anymore. She turned. I know. He nodded, slowly. I'll still call you the cook, though. Keeps things simple. She smiled, the first real one he'd seen on her. Simple's fine, she said. The door rattled suddenly, wind again, or maybe something more. Gideon walked over, checked the latch, peered into the night. He stayed there longer than needed, watching the woods. She joined him. They're coming. Not yet, he said, but they will. She stood beside him, eyes on the trees. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't flinch, and for the first time, he said her name, the one her mother gave her, the one no one had used since. Go get the stew. Go, he said, almost tender. Let's eat. She went. The fire burned warm, and the storm, for once, waited outside. The thaw came slow, like a shy apology. Trees shed their icy skins, and the earth, once locked in frost, gave way to green shoots and soft mud. With a changing season, the quiet inside the cabin deepened. It wasn't the silence of tension anymore, but something closer to peace, fragile, unfinished, but real. The girl no longer hesitated when she spoke. Gideon no longer grunted in place of words. Their days took on rhythm. She swept ash from the hearth before sunrise. He repaired broken fencing along the north trail. They shared meals inside now, even laughed once or twice, though neither would admit it aloud. But peace, on the frontier, was always temporary. It came like the calm between thunderclaps, and they both felt the charge returning to the air, though neither named it. Rumors reached them in pieces. A trader passing through warned of riders in the south, men with burnt coats and snake tattoos, gutting homestead for coin or spite. Another brought news of the Jameson place, 20 miles east, torched in the night. No survivors. Some said the bandits weren't looking for anything in particular, just blood. Others whispered they were ex-Confederates still waging a war the world had forgotten. But none of it mattered. Not really. Because one morning, while out checking snays, Gideon found a rabbit hanging by its back legs, throat slit clean, and a playing card tucked beneath it. A jack of hearts. He stood still for a long time, long enough for the clouds to shift and the light to change. Then he crushed the card in his fist and walked back toward the cabin, faster than he had in years. That night, he boarded the windows. The girl helped, no questions asked. He placed his rifle near the door, knife by the bed, axe under the table. He filled buckets with water and set them beside the hearth. When she lit candles, he blew them out. "Dark safer," he said. "They don't shoot what they can't see." She nodded. The quiet fire inside them, what they'd built in place of family, burned hotter now. Fear fed it, but so did resolve. 3 nights later, they came. It began with a sound no animal makes, a whistle, low and deliberate, slicing through the trees. Then came the hoofbeats, steady and distant. Gideon stepped out onto the porch with his rifle, every inch of him a fortress. The girl crouched behind the window, watching through a crack in the boards. There were 6 of them, mounted and masked, rifles slung lazily across their shoulders. One dismounted and walked forward. He had a scar running down the side of his face like a river on a map. "Evening, big fella," he called. "Heard you been keeping company." Gideon said nothing. The man continued. "We're just here for a look. Maybe a warm meal. Might even take the girl off your hands. You know, save you some work." Still nothing. Scarface spat. "Shoot yourself." He turned back to his men and raised a hand. The first bullet shattered the cabin's window. Gideon fired before the glass hit the floor. One man toppled off his horse, screaming. Chaos broke loose. The girl crawled under the floorboards, heart pounding so loud it drowned the gunfire. She saw Gideon's boots move, fast, precise. He wasn't hiding. He was hunting. The front door blasted inward. A man stepped through, shotgun raised. But Gideon was already there, swinging the axe. The sound it made wasn't like in the movies. It was real and wet and final. The man dropped like butchered meat. Another came through the back window, only to be met with the edge of a stove pan wielded by the girl. It didn't kill him, but it gave Gideon enough time to drag him out and finish it. Then came the fire. They'd poured kerosene on the walls. The flames licked up fast, eager and hungry. Smoke filled the cabin. The girl coughed, eyes burning, as she crawled toward the trapdoor Gideon had kicked open. "In!" he roared. She dropped into the crawl space. He followed, then kicked out the side panel and shoved her into the dark woods behind the cabin. They ran. Branches toward their clothes. Thorns bit into skin, but neither stopped. Behind them, the cabin, their almost home, burned in full. It cast long shadows through the trees, lighting their path like a funeral pyre. They didn't speak, not even when they reached the creek and dove into the icy water to mask their scent. Only once they reached the hollow, a narrow ravine he used to scout from, did they stop. He checked her for wounds, hands trembling, not from fear but from the fire that still roared behind his eyes. "I'm okay," she said. He nodded, but didn't speak. They spent the night under a thicket, shivering, soaked to the bone. At dawn, Gideon moved with purpose. He gathered stones, built a small fire, cooked jerky and hard bread. They ate in silence. "We need help," she said, voice hoarse. "I don't trust anyone out here." She hesitated. "What about the one who leaves the rabbits?" He looked up. She continued. The man in the trees. The one who never comes close but always watches. Gideon sighed, thought he was just a shadow. I saw him, more than once. They waited, 2 days. On the third, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, he appeared, tall, lean, wrapped in elk hide and silence. He had a bow slung over one shoulder, dark braids tied with bone, and a gaze like still water. The girl approached him first, offering half a biscuit. He took it, broke it in two, and handed one piece back. He never gave a name, but he stayed. He led them to a cave high above the valley, shielded by brush and rock. Inside, they found a spring, dry firewood, and animal hides for warmth. The man, Tuma, they eventually learned, never asked why they were running. But he watched, always watched. Gideon and the girl slept in shifts. Tuma didn't sleep at all, it seemed. He moved like part of the earth, unseen until needed. But even up there, safety was a lie. The bandits returned, hunting, smelling blood, revenge, or perhaps just unfinished business. They left no sign, but Tuma sensed them. They will come, he said one night, speaking for the first time. They follow like wolves. Gideon readied himself, knife sharpened, rifle cleaned. He laid out a plan. The cave had one entrance. They would bottleneck them there. The girl was to hide in the crevice at the back, rifle in hand. I can shoot, she said. I know. He touched her face, the first touch of affection he'd offered. She didn't flinch. When the riders came, it wasn't with stealth. They rode hard, laughing, yelling. They thought they had their prey cornered. What they didn't expect was a fury waiting in that narrow mouth of stone. The first man fell to an arrow, Tuma's. The second met Gideon's knife. Then the shooting started. Muzzle flashes lit the cave like lightning. The girl crouched behind a rock, heart pounding. One bandit slipped through, gun raised. She fired. He dropped. Silence fell. Then a scream, Tuma's voice, not in pain, but rage. He fought like a spirit, leaping from shadows, his blade catching the firelight. Gideon bled, shot through the shoulder, slashed along the ribs. He fought anyway, until the last man turned and fled into the woods, blood trailing behind him. They didn't chase. Tuma crouched beside Gideon. The wound was bad, deep. The girl tore strips from her dress, pressed them against the bleeding. Don't die, she whispered. Don't leave me. Daddy. He opened his eyes. You called me Daddy. She nodded, tears streaking soot down her cheeks. He smiled, a slow, crooked thing that barely touched his mouth, but burned in his eyes like dawn. You can stay, he said, as long as you want. The girl leaned over him, sobbing quietly, not from fear, but from the weight of everything they'd survived. When morning came, the cave was quiet again. Gideon slept, breast steady. Tuma stood at the mouth, watching the horizon. The girl sat beside the old wooden hole she had pulled from the wreckage before they fled. It was scorched, cracked, but whole enough to hold. She held it close and watched the first rays of sunlight break across the valley. The fire had come, but it had not taken everything. Not this time. Winter set its teeth into the land and did not let go. Snow draped the hills like burial cloth, and the wind howled through the pines with a voice that sounded half wolf, half woman. In the cabin at Black Hollow, the fire was fed each morning with trembling hands and each evening with careful precision. The girl had learned by now how to stack the wood so it burned clean, how to bank the coals just enough to keep them alive through the night. Gideon didn't say so, but he noticed. He noticed everything. They spoke more now. Not often, and not in bursts, but in pieces, words that dropped between them like pebbles in a river, slow and deliberate. When he handed her a bundle of kindling, she nodded instead of flinching. When she passed him a bowl of stew, he said, "Good," and meant it. Some nights they even sat at the table at the same time. Not exactly together, but not apart either. Outside, the world froze. Inside, something thawed. One morning she slipped on the icy porch steps and landed hard. The breath knocked out of her. She barely registered the sound of the door swinging open, or the blur of shadow that reached down and lifted her like she weighed nothing. Gideon set her gently on the bench, muttered something about boots, then disappeared into the barn. The next day, she found a small pair of fur-lined boots near the door. Worn, but clean. Just her size. No note. No comment. But she wore them. When she stood beside him as he chopped wood, he adjusted her stance without words, moved her foot slightly, placed the axe in her hands. She tried, failed, tried again. On the third swing, the log split. She toned, triumphant. He nodded once. That was enough. By January, she'd memorized the kitchen. She could make biscuit from memory, stew from instinct. He taught her how to trap. She taught him how to season. They learned the rhythms of each other, like two branches growing from opposite ends of the same tree. He started leaving her things. A hunting knife in a sheath, a tin cup polished clean, a tiny brass button she once admired on his coat, now sewn onto her shawl. She started leaving things for him. A stitch patch on his sleeve, an oak tree with crooked limbs, a folded square of parchment with charcoal sketches, him, her, the cabin, a fire burning bright. He kept them all. She knew because he placed them near his bed, not in the stove. But he never told her anything. Not about before. Not about the woman whose photograph still sat turned down on the mantel. Not about the child whose small jacket she once found in the drawer and quietly returned. Until one night, when the wind blew so hard it rattled the walls, and the fire threatened to die no matter how much which he fed it. Gideon stood by the window, eyes lost in the dark. She watched him, waiting. She sang, he said suddenly, even in storms worse than this. Especially then. The girl didn't interrupt. She'd hum first. Then words would come. She had a voice like smoke, soft, but it filled the whole place, drove the fear out. He turned from the window. You hum sometimes, he said. Caught myself listening. The girl looked at the fire, not at him. I stopped, thought it bothered you. It did, because it reminded me. But that's not the same as bad. Silence followed, but it wasn't cold. It was something shared. In town, things had started to shift. Men who never ventured near Black Hollow now eyed the path with suspicion. Strangers arrived and asked questions. A traveling preacher warned of old ghosts and new crimes. And some locals, drunk on gossip and suspicion, whispered about the girl, how she was not one of us, how Gideon had no right, how something about the whole arrangement smelled wrong. One day, 2 men rode up the trail and didn't knock. They waited outside like wolves. Gideon opened the door slowly, not with fear, but calculation. One of them, Clay Milner, a rancher with more hate than cattle, nodded toward the girl, who peeked out from behind the curtain. You sheltering her still? He asked. She cooks, Gideon replied. Cook or not, ain't right. Ain't natural. Folks don't like it. Folks don't live here. The second man spat tobacco near the porch. Heard there was trouble in Texas. Raids. A girl matching her description was part of it. Maybe she brought the fire with her. Gideon didn't blink. You come here to talk, or to burn. Clay narrowed his eyes. Not yet. They left, but the message was loud. The girl asked nothing. Gideon said nothing. But that night, he sat closer to her near the fire, shoulders nearly touching. She dreamed of fire, not the warm kind, the other kind. She woke sweating, heart thudding. He was already awake, sharpening a blade. Their eyes met. We leave if we have to, he said, but only if we have to. I don't want to run. Neither do I. They didn't say it, but they both knew the world wouldn't care about quiet bonds or slow trust. To the world, he was a giant and she was a ghost, and their peace would always be a threat to someone. Days grew longer. Snow melted slowly, revealing earth beneath, muddy, scarred, but alive. They planted early, just a few seeds in the side plot. He tilled. She watered. Sometimes she caught him watching her wake, a softness in his gaze like the first light after storm. They laughed one afternoon when she tossed flour at him. It landed on his beard. He stared, deadpan. She braced for a scold. Instead, he flung a spoonful back. She gasped, and suddenly the cabin filled with laughter. Sharp, loud, real. The echo of something lost and reclaimed. Later, she drew a small circle in the dust near the fireplace. This is us, she said. In the middle. He nodded. She drew a ring around it. This is what we don't let in. He looked at her and said the words he hadn't dared before. You're more than just a cook. I know. He smiled then. Not much, but enough. Trouble came again, this time without warning. A rider, blooded, arrived near dusk and collapsed off his horse. Gideon recognized him from town, a boy named Eli who'd worked the supply post. They're coming, he gasped. Burned down the dyer's place. Took the Henson girl. Killed the dog. They are headed north. Gideon didn't ask who. He didn't need to. That night, he packed quietly. Guns cleaned. Knives strapped. Food bundled. The girl did the same, never asking where they'd go. She just stayed close, her fingers brushing his when they reached for the same lantern. But they didn't leave. Not yet. They might not come this way, he said. And I'm tired of running from shadows. She nodded. Then we stand. He looked at her, truly looked. I ain't never had someone stand with me. Not since. You do now. They set up watches, reinforced the walls, hid food in case of siege. Every sound in the woods made her flinch, but she learned to listen like he did, to distinguish wind from boots, animal from man. Tom appeared at the edge of the woods 3 nights later. He didn't speak. He never did. Just left a bundle. Dried meat, herbs, a small stone carved into the shape of bear. Protection. She left him a drawing of all 3 of them, Gideon, herself, and Toma back to back beneath a tree. He took it. That was enough. Their days were no longer quiet. Not entirely, but there was still fire inside. A different kind. A steady burn. One night, after the girl had drifted into sleep, Gideon sat by the hearth, turning a small piece of wood in his hand. It was a broken horse from the barn, now mended, polished. He'd fixed it in secret. He placed it beside her pillow. When she found it in the morning, she didn't speak. She just hugged it close and kept it near all day. The storm hadn't come yet, but it was near. They could feel it in the air, see it in the birds flying low, in the silence that crept over the valley. But they did not run. They sharpened blades. They counted bullets. They sat by the fire and held each other's gaze longer than before. He no longer called her the girl in his head. She was his, not by blood, not by law, but by fire. And fire, he knew, forged stronger things than blood ever could. They were ready, not for war, perhaps, but for each other.